Well, George Bush, I think today's the day you learned about the evolution of money. And who better to explain it to you than one of the best money experts there is, Jim. I was the President of the United States of America. Not only that, but I was elected 2 consecutive terms, and after all, the United States has more money than Canada. I think I know a thing or two about money. Yeah. Well, did you know that way back before you or I were even born, people used everyday items to barter back and forth to gain what they needed? There was no such thing as money, and certainly not this paper money we have today. They did, however, need a common commodity to trade, something that everyone would accept as a medium of exchange. Well, yeah, I knew they didn't always have this money we use today. They used to use gold to trade back and forth. That's right, George. Goldsmiths then began starting to form the earliest type of banking facility. They began by holding people's gold and loaning it to others at a small fee, but to do this they needed to use fiat money. The goldsmith would also melt the gold into small coins which were easily tradable and handy for both parties. The banks used a technique called clipping the coinage, which allowed them to loan more than they had, and at any rate they pleased. The people realized this was happening and threatened to rush the bank. So the banks then had to pay interest to the people as a loan on their gold, and as proof they were given bank slips, which were also tradable in market, and allowed them to leave their gold with the banks, making it easier to handle. Really? So these were fractionally backed banknotes. That kind of sounds like us. Except they would have been much smaller scale, seeing as how there wasn't too many people around back then. Our deposit multiplier would blow them out of the water. We have no set rate now, and loaning people's money for interest rates across the country generates us extraordinary amounts of money each year. Yes, George, I suppose you are correct. But then as more people started depositing in these private facilities, they needed bigger vaults and more space for all the gold. They began to keep the gold and use it for investment purposes, and continued to issue banknotes, which were backed by only 1/10 of the gold that was held. The bank eventually traded these notes to the people in return for their gold, creating a note currency which was an early form of the paper money that we use today. Interesting. I always just thought of money as a medium of exchange, something that holds value which fluctuates based on the strength of its economy and the supply and demand of its operations. Well, George, you were also correct. That is just a more modern take on the definition of money. But now you know some of the history behind it too.